Feel free to put this on in the background, folks, as this is going to be a long video.
Hello and welcome back to Triclaw Gaming with me, Fletcher.
And welcome to this full-length, spoiler-filled review of Dominion. This is your only warning, and that this video is going to spoil a heck of a lot of the movie. So if you haven't seen it yet and you still want to watch this review, it's on your own head. Are they gone? Right, let's get started. And don't forget, if you are new here, please like, comment and subscribe for more content from all of us at Triclaw Gaming. So, Dominion. It has been interesting to see how polarizing this film has ended up. YouTube movie reviewers are ripping it to shreds. The community is like the Western Front right now, and the critics versus audience scores on websites like Rotten Tomatoes are radically different too. Just from a strictly cultural perspective, it's been rather interesting. And something I want to say before we go anywhere with this review is that I'm going to be giving my views here and justifying them with what I found from the film. If you disagree, that's good. Leave a comment with your evidence. After all, I'm a history teacher and we love some evidence-based arguments. Don't just leave hate in the comment section, eh? So where shall we start? So I think it's important before we talk about Dominion that I explain what I liked about the original movies so that we have a clear starting point for discussing Dominion's flaws. Jurassic Park was a story written about science gone mad, the hubris of humans and the belief that we have control of our environment. Dinosaurs were the medium used in order to explore these ideas and bring them to the big screen in an interesting way. The Lost World then furthered this idea to the idea of ownership, corporate greed versus environmentalism, and the dangers of these dinosaurs getting out into our world. Now this is of course a very truncated explanation of the themes in these first two movies, but I think it's good to remember this as we move on to look at Dominion. It's also worth thinking about what genre of movies these were, with an emphasis on were. And when thinking of this, there is a quote from Best in Slot which really resonates. "These are films no longer made for me." The original movies, or at least the first two, were a mix of arguably thriller and horror. The pacing of the first movie reminds me so much of Alien, as does a lot of the first film. The second movie strayed closer to action, but still held on to a lot of the thriller and horror elements. Even Jurassic Park 3, which again, while straying closer to action, still maintained some of its thrilling moments. However, since we had those films, we have seen the rise of such massive action franchises like the Avengers movies. And I think that the Jurassic World films have suffered from the rise of the on-screen flashy light show films, where much of the emphasis is on action and CGI. Action over character. Not that the Avenger movies are devoid of character, of course, I'm just saying that they are first and foremost action movies. Now that's fine, I'm not saying it's bad to have action movies, but as Best in Slot says, the idea of turning off your brain to watch a film like Dominion seems wrong, and it's not what I would expect from a Jurassic movie. But again, these movies are no longer aimed at people like me. They're instead aimed at folks who like the Avengers films or kaiju movies. I don't especially like these types of movies, and this is probably the first reason why Dominion didn't appeal to me. I think it's also important to look at the first two movies of this trilogy as they set up the expectations for Dominion. Jurassic World tried to recapture some of the original movie. We got to see the park running but dealing with the problems of constant growth and how to keep being successful. We saw the introduction of the hybrids, still a stupid idea by the way, and Dr. Wu returning as an individual that is starting to sink into megalomania or a god complex. We saw the introduction of Claire as a character who only saw dinosaurs as a means to an end, and Owen Grady, who developed a frankly unhealthy relationship with his pets, I mean velociraptors, and on saying that years of really screwed up fan fiction comes to mind. Fallen Kingdom continued from the first World movie, highlighting the issue of again ownership and whether animals have the right to exist when we made them, a theme more or less copy-pasted from The Lost World. It also returns Dr. Wu making more military hardware in the form of the Indoraptor, which attempted to be a more scary monster running around the mansion. We saw Claire becoming more of an environmentalist, similar to what happened with John Hammond, while Owen is just Owen. That movie ended with the reveal of the child clone and her releasing about 24 dinosaurs into the nature of America to survive, with a warning from Ian Malcolm that humanity is now in trouble and that the dinosaurs have the capacity to retake the world. Jurassic World and Fallen Kingdom were, however, action-heavy movies. Owen Grady was our Avenger, almost a superhero, and the film's plots were driven heavily by action sequences. They were not unintelligent movies, but they were definitely missing a lot of the more intelligent aspects that the earlier films demonstrated. So in order to review Dominion, I'm going to take and explain aspects of its nature as opposed to just going through it in a linear fashion. So let's start with the first and most important aspect to me, the plot and the story. Dominion is a story of two halves that weave around one another until towards the very end. We begin the movie with a video reporter discussing the problems that the world is currently suffering as a result of the proliferation of the dinosaurs. We see dinosaurs causing damage, chasing children, and the Mosasaurus makes its one and only appearance in the film, attacking a fishing boat. And right away, this highlights a problem. The movie doesn't and will not fully explain how 24 dinosaurs escaping the mansion has become a global issue. It tries to explain this problem with throwaway lines and further throwaway scenes about black market dinosaur breeding programs and such, but it never really justifies just how prolific dinosaurs are, or at least that is what it was trying to suggest. Battle at Big Rock, the prologue and the trailers all presented us with the idea that this was Jurassic World, where just stepping out of your front door risked an encounter with the Carnotaurus that ate your next door neighbours who always played their music too loud. But this is not what this movie becomes. It's interesting also that this movie, where dinosaurs are supposed to be everywhere, we do not see the world's military interfere at all. It's almost as if the dinosaurs have been allowed to become as dangerous as they are with absolutely no interference. After this, the film focuses the start of its runtime on Claire and Owen in two of the first action sequences in this very action-heavy movie. Claire and the vet from Fallen Kingdom are breaking into an illegal dinosaur breeding facility for Nasutoceratops. These are our first dinosaurs, among many, and our first animatronics, among many. A sick baby is at risk, and due to the length of time it takes the DFW to get involved, and I have to say it's nice to see a Jurassic World Evolution 2 reference here, Claire steals the baby dinosaur. This leads to alarms and trouble as they barrel into a van, get shot at by the rustlers, and only survive because a bunch of Sinoceratops and Nasuto in the next field smash up the pursuing trucks. It's an action-packed scene, and in the end, the vet and screaming nerd guy from Fallen Kingdom both tell Deering that this has gone too far, and that's it. They are basically gone from the rest of the film. Franklin shows up again a little later, but in reality this opening is the largest role these characters have. Meanwhile, Chris Pratt is being Chris Pratt, rustling up some Parasaurolophus riding a horse, all very manly. And this scene, again action heavy, leaves me with a very awkward feeling. It closely mirrors the scene in The Lost World, where Peter Ludlow's men capture the Parasaurolophus, and yet here we're supposed to think that it's a good thing? The actual capture is pretty violent, with the dinosaur almost killing itself falling off a rocky ridge, but it's all okay because Owen alone manages to stop this multi-ton dinosaur and do his stupid hand thing to it, which he seems to think now will work on every single dinosaur. Owen, you are not Hiccup. In any case, they capture the dinosaur and the scene shifts again to the clone child Maisie. Now this film focuses so much on Clone Child, and I think it's one of the horrid tag-alongs that they have to put up with from Fallen Kingdom. She helps a logging site deal with some Apatosaurus, and yeah, that's our three main returning characters from Jurassic World setup. I'll discuss Clone Child properly later on in this review. We also learn that Biosyn, the folks responsible for Nedry's plot in Jurassic Park 1 and the protagonists in Jurassic Park Trespasser 2, have sole rights to the dinosaurs' protection. We have Lewis Dodgson reintroduced, this time as a sort of Steve Jobs parody, trying to take this weird evangelical corporation standpoint. It frames Biosyn as the bad guys, unless you haven't seen the original movies or know anything about the lore, in which case go watch and read. And again, I apologise for any future Apple product references in the rest of this review. Before we move away from the returning cast, we also see some not very nice fellows stalking Grady, Maisie and their log cabin in the woods. He's obviously one of these evil poacher types that the news report at the start has mentioned, and he's very obviously evil with his tone of voice and his heavily tattooed face. It's a little superhero movie-ish, but important to the plot here is that Clone Child and Baby Blue, yes, Blue has had a kid, are hot property and wanted by Biosyn. I'll discuss Baby Blue and Blue herself when we get to the character section. For now, all that is important to know is that Blue is barely in this movie. The poachers manage to catch the Baby Blue and Clone Child, resulting in Grady and Deering going off to rescue them. We then switch to a farm and some kids who have a very harrowing experience with some very oversized bugs, and I excuse any use of quotes from the Starship Troopers movies in the rest of this review. This section with the giant bugs again, action heavy, is actually sort of terrifying. The way these animals swirl and coalesce like a flock of birds looks really great on screen. This scene results in the return of Ellie Sattler, who we learn is investigating these supersized bugs and where they come from. Maybe Clendathu? Anyway, we learn that the bugs are only targeting food not grown with Biosyn seed, leading Ellie to suspect foul play and the dangers of global starvation. But this is pretty much the last time this plot thread gets seriously mentioned, and these bugs introduce another problem to the plot. The trailers for this movie revealed, I would say, 75% of the on-screen dinosaur action. Most of the movie, this Jurassic World movie, is focused on a bug problem. Like, who cares about a slightly larger than normal locust? If I wanted a movie about giant bugs, I know where I would turn. We were all expecting a movie about the problems of humanity existing in a world with dinosaurs and pterosaurs and mosasaurs. What we get in the end is a movie about giant bugs. It feels so strange. It's like starting Jurassic Park 1 and then someone switching it to 8-legged freaks while you're out of the room. Ellie Sattler decides to rope in the assistance of Alan Grant, a paleontologist, to help her with the bug problem. One wonders why she wouldn't go and talk to an entomologist, you know, actual bug experts. But this does give us a great scene where Alan and her catch up. I love this little interaction where Ellie tells Alan that she broke up with her husband Mark from Jurassic Park 3, and Alan Grant is like, oh no, anyway, in that Jeremy Clarkson way. It's clear that the magic is still there between the two of them. This scene is also packed with little Easter eggs. The Velociraptor vocalizer from JP3, a Spinosaurus skeleton model in the background, raptor claws. See how many references you can spot when watching this scene. Alan agrees to help Ellie, who has been invited to Biosyn's compound by none other than Ian Malcolm. Meanwhile, the film moves to Malta, where Deering and Grady have tracked their kidnapped youngsters to a dinosaur black market operation. We see Maisie get separated from Baby Blue and the introduction of one of our new characters, KAYLA. I'll talk about her more in the character section, but to be brief, I liked her. She's a rough and tumble sort, a female mirror to Owen, only a lot more likeable. Meanwhile, Grady and Deering infiltrate the black market, where we see plenty of on-screen dinosaurs, including a baby Baryonyx and a baby Carnotaurus. Chaos, however, quickly ensues, as they are identified by a mysterious lady in white. This mysterious character reminds me of a line from Kill Bill, where one of the characters is identified as looking like a villain from Star Trek. In escaping from the black market, Grady releases a fully grown Carnotaurus and Allosaurus from cages, resulting in carnage as everyone tries to avoid becoming dinosaur chow. Grady finds out where their youngsters are before leaving an unwilling informant to get chowed on by a fully grown Baryonyx. However, mysterious woman in white, who is in secret communication with Biosyn, also has a secret weapon like any true Bond villain, the Atrociraptors. Now, I'll discuss all the creatures in a different section, but these guys really remind me of mini Indorexes. I think one of them was even white. It's revealed these Atrociraptors have been trained to hunt and kill targets using a similar laser system to the Indoraptor. And when this happened, I rolled my eyes so hard that I thought they would fall out of my skull. It was such a stupid idea in the first place, why reuse it? If you can point a laser at the target, just point a gun at them and shoot them. A dinosaur is not a more effective assassination method than a man with a gun. I don't see Agent 47 deploying laser-controlled dinosaurs anytime soon. Not to mention, this raises the questions of how the mysterious woman in white got these raptors trained like this in the first place, but it's never returned to. It's another example of a plot or character point this film puts in and then throws away when it's no longer needed. Anyway, dinosaurs chase Claire and Grady through the streets of Malta, where we have Grady repeat his raptor bike scene from the first movie, one of a few scenes that get recycled for this film. The raptors fail miserably to stop them, once again raising the question of why they would keep trying with this concept, and the two escape with Kayla on board her plane, agreeing to get them to buy us in, since she works for them. The woman in white is now done for the movie, as are the Atrociraptors, the Carnos, and the Allos. Goodbye. All outcasts are now heading for Biosyn Valley, and I would say this marks the end of Act 1 for the film. This is also basically the end of any dinosaurs in the human world scenes that we get, which again is not what the film's marketing was showing us. Now, we also learn that Dr. Wu is also working for Biosyn, and that the eye locust is his fault. This new Biosyn product, which doesn't come with a headphone port, is not acting as expected, and Wu wants to correct the problem. He needs Maisie and Baby Blue to fix his mistake, among many mistakes he should bloody be fixing. The explanation of all of this is a bit woolly. Basically, Clone Child and Baby Blue are examples of asexual reproduction. Blue had her baby without a male, thanks to monitor DNA, and this feels like that scene in Jurassic World 1 where they do a whole exposition scene explaining that the reason the Indorex can camouflage and change its thermal output is because of two particular DNA strands. It strikes me as an explanation for the baby dreamt up after the idea that Blue should have a baby, as opposed to writing a good explanation to get one. Clone Child is the same, revealed to be a clone of this Charlotte Lockwood, who now apparently worked on Site B for the original 93 team. There is a nice pic of her in front of the original gates just for nostalgia's sake. It's revealed that the real Charlotte Lockwood had a genetic disease that eventually kills her, but she was able to correct the issue in her clone child Maisie by using a pathogen to alter all of her cells simultaneously. It's some next level technobabble, but it's all okay. It's an okay explanation for Maisie, and again, they had to do something with her character as a result of Fallen Kingdom, but it does basically retcon everything we were told in the previous film. And this is another problem with this film's plot overall. It seems terrified of the previous two movies. It wants to avoid every opportunity to actually engage with the ideas they created. Where have we seen this before, where the third movie of a trilogy tries to retcon the previous? Now, Act 2 starts off for both teams. Alan Grant and Ellie Sattler arrive at Biosyn after taking a plane. There is this wonderful scene of Ellie and Alan at the airport before we take off, and Ellie remarks that she never quite gets used to seeing the dinosaurs, which is a nice little remark considering Alan Grant's own remark in Jurassic Park 3, when he sees the dinosaurs again and remarks that he had forgotten the effect they could have. They arrive at Apple Dinosaur Facility in the mountains, a nice looking place by the way, and meet with Ian Malcolm, who's halfway through a speech to some clearly millennial students. I do not like Ian in this movie at all, but more on that later. We then have a few cringy scenes between them, such as Alan Grant and this obvious "this is what a boomer thinks a millennial is like" as they get coffee. Basically, all that's important to know here is that Ian is actually a double agent and is working to bring down the big corporation from the inside. Meanwhile, en route to Apple, KAYLA fails to convince the nice guys at Apple Air Traffic Control that they're a normal delivery, and evil Lewis Dodgson turns off this automated defense force field that stops the pterosaurs attacking planes. I have a problem with this. Why would pterosaurs deliberately attack planes? I mean, we have large birds now. They don't deliberately attack jet aircraft. KAYLA's plane is then attacked by the Quetzalcoatlus, whose air combat moves are so perfect perhaps it's been watching the new Top Gun movie. It's a fast and swift attack that disables both engines, starts fires, and puts the plane on a crash course for the ground in seconds. I wish my aircraft in War Thunder were this effective. Also, that's it for the Quetz now. Once more, the trailer revealed all the action we see of it. With the plane going down, Claire is made to eject from the aircraft, while Grady and KAYLA take their chances with the crash. The scene where Claire ejects and tumbles around is done really well, and it reminds me of some old World War II footage of a paratrooper leaping from an aircraft. Claire survives, barely, more the pity, but ends up in Biosyn's dinosaur preserve, having to sneak away from the Therizinosaurus in its first of two scenes. It's the scene from the trailer, so again, we have seen most of it already, but it is still a good scene, and one of the few tense moments in the movie. Meanwhile, Grady and KAYLA are crashing. It looks dangerous, but the fact is we know they both survive. The trailers revealed them with the Pyroraptor, and we haven't gotten to that yet, so we know this is a predestined survival. Again, thinking about superhero movies, the question of stakes and how there are basically none removes a lot of the tension and suspense out of this film. None of our cast feel in danger, and this is a trait that continues through the whole movie. Having crashed the plane and survived on top of this dam and a frozen lake, Grady and KAYLA have a very small period of time to investigate KAYLA's backstory. We get a rapid 20 seconds or so explaining how she's ex-military, doing what she does for a paycheck. It's nice backstory, but again, like so many of the character moments in Dominion, it feels rushed, limited, and gets pushed to the back seat so that we can have yet another action scene, this time involving a fully feathered Pyroraptor. The Pyro looks great, and I will chat about it more in the character section. What I was more surprised at was that the scenes we see of it in the trailers was basically the whole Pyroraptor scene. Once Owen and KAYLA escape, that's it. So long, no more Pyroraptor. The limited use of these amazing creatures for this film is a crime, and it's one of its biggest failures, but more on that later. The two of them move into the forest, where they narrowly miss getting eaten by the Giganotosaurus in its first scene. It looks fantastic. The scene is ruined a little, however, by KAYLA having to state that it's the biggest theropod, because it feels like explaining exposition rather than just showing it. And the scene shows us plenty as it beats down the beloved Rexy, so it's not really necessary. Claire, meanwhile, finds one of Biosyn's viewing towers, and while waiting for it to activate, we hear a familiar chirping. We have the return of the Dilophosaurus. The scene works well in the dark, with the feel of the Nedry death scene. It is a little rushed, and I feel like it doesn't give the tension time to rise, but eventually we have that trailer snap of Claire about to be sprayed before Owen Grady suddenly appears, grips its mouth holding it shut, stopping it spraying, and rescues his love. How touching. Meanwhile, Alan and Ellie infiltrate the labs, find the mutated super locust and get their DNA sample, which is needed to confirm that the locusts outside the facility are the same as the ones inside. It's one of the very few solid character moments between them as they secretly investigate the place. Alan shows his obvious displeasure picking up a giant bug, and it all feels very natural. It's a shame not more of the movie was like this. The peace is shattered, however, when the bugs go nuts and they have to make a run for it. Wanting to know more, they immediately bump into Clone Child, who has escaped the clutches of Discount Steve Jobs and Dr. Wu, who identifies them by name, and the three of them join up. This film has this weird tendency to name stuff multiple times like it doubts the audience. It mentions the size of the Giganotosaurus multiple times, as well as naming the old cast multiple times, just in case you were unclear who all of these old folks were. Alan, Ellie and the clone use the Hyperloop train system to escape the Biosyn facility, being made aware of a secret informant inside of the company. I can't for the life of me remember this guy's name. Ramsey Cole, more on him later. So he lets our old cast know he was involved in getting information out and helps the gang escape. But wily old Steve Jobs finds out through the magic of CCTV what's going on. So he stops the train in the eye tunnels under the facility in order to dispose of them. It turns out that the old amber tunnels are full of Dimetrodon, which attempt to kill the gang in again their only part of this film. Meanwhile, Ian is found out to have betrayed Discount Steve Jobs and gets fired. He makes this really awful speech to everyone there, and I wish at some point he had mentioned Nedry or something about the original park, but nope, he makes a really bad speech before wandering off with the still undiscovered spy Cole. He steals a jeep and drives off just in time to rescue Alan, Ellie and Maisie from Dimetrodon death. The movie keeps up its brisk pace and devotion to action sequences. Fearing his plan may be exposed, Discount Steve Jobs decides to set fire to the eye locusts, trying to destroy the evidence. However, like most Bond villains, it seems that he has a flaw in his flamethrower chamber. The locusts escape before they can be fully destroyed thanks to some sort of glass ceiling or other weakness in the roof. I feel like some sort of simple pesticide would have been more effective and safer, or maybe just flood the chamber with carbon dioxide. Either of these methods would have been more effective and probably cheaper than a flamethrower chamber, but this Bond villain method is necessary for adding stakes to the end of the film. The escaping locusts swarm above the facility, still on fire mind you, and as they start dying, fall into the surrounding forest, starting a huge forest fire which forms the backdrop to the end of the film. The two plots and character groups finally meet up here, with Ian crashing his jeep, which just happens to roll over and end up next to the tower where the Jurassic World cast is located, in a wonderful example of coincidence. And this is where we have the main Giganotosaurus scene, where they escape being eaten together. During this scene, Ian Malcolm almost copies his moment with the flare in Jurassic Park 1 to distract the beast, until it gets close enough for him to spike it with a locust on a stick, like he's some Greek hero from the Odyssey. I admit it's a good throw, and it's good to see Ian regain some of that action hero tendencies that he had in The Lost World. This surprise attack is ultra successful, and the Giga turns into a dragon for a short time before it chases them down again. The next action scene we have switches from CGI dinosaur to animatronic multiple times, as they basically recreate the scene from Dino Crisis. I have to say that the animatronics again look really bad compared to the CGI, but it is a good action sequence, and it would make a perfect end act scene if we hadn't already had so many scenes of running cast and dinosaur violence so far. With all the dinosaurs called back to the Biosyn facility for safety, and more of this in a minute, the cast discover they cannot escape until the anti-pterosaur force field is back online, and to do this requires the cast to split up and handle different things. Owen, Alan and Clone Child are going after Baby Blue, while Ellie and Claire go after the server systems in order to get the force field back on. There is this cringy bit of dialogue between Owen and Grady where Alan almost seems envious of Grady and his raptor training. I honestly don't think Alan Grant, with everything he's experienced, would think that turning raptors into trained pets would be a good thing. In capturing Baby Blue, the three of them go down into this boiler room thing, and this is probably as close to scary as the film gets as they look for Baby Blue. Alan explains in detail how apparently raptors no longer disembowel, but go straight for the neck. It's a shame there's no real good on-screen raptor kill to prove this fact. Another example of the movie choosing to tell us something rather than show us. Baby Blue is then caught by all of them doing the stupid bloody hand thing, including Grant. I know that this is like Owen's thing, but it doesn't make it any less silly, especially since Clone Child is the one who starts it. Meanwhile, the girls face a mass of dead locusts in order to get to the server racks, while Ian makes a total disaster of directing them. I thought this was going to be a nice remake of the scene in Jurassic Park 1, the whole push to close thing, but the fact Ian ruins it and that the girls have to resort to smashing stuff with an axe, I feel like the scene was trying to be funny, but no one in my cinema laughed. They succeed in diverting power to the anti-pterosaur force field, however in doing so, trap the escaping Lewis Dodgson in the Hyperloop tunnels. There is an interesting scene before where he's packing up for his escape and we see the Barbasol can from the first film. It's a nice touch for nostalgia's sake, but again it does raise questions, like when and how did that get there? Last we saw of it, it was being buried in mud. There is also this really forced scene between him and Cole where Dodgson claims that Ramsey Cole was his protege, and Cole decides not to help Dodgson at all, dropping all these files on the floor, and it just doesn't add anything to the plot at all. The guy just stands there looking at him. Again, I feel like it was supposed to be this big shock moment, but the plot didn't really make us care about any of these characters, so it just fell flat. Dodgson, now stuck in the Hyperloop tunnels, attempts to escape, and this is one of the few good sections of this film. Surrounded by venting gases and darkness, the Dilophosaurus return, and in a sequence that closely mirrors Nedry's death in the first movie, Dilophosaurus kill Dodgson. This is the only main character death in the movie, but I do like the scene. Meanwhile, the cast begin their escape plan trying to get to the chopper and KAYLA. However, they have a small problem. All of the dinosaurs, that's supposed to be all of them, but I don't know, maybe a few of them, appeared to be fitting in this tiny courtyard and now stand between the cast and escape. Amongst them are the Giga and the Rex, and thus we have yet basically another giant dinosaur fight, the same as the Rex Indo-Rex fight, and it hits all of the same notes. Only the filming of this scene is worse. The fight itself is occurring mostly off screen and in the dark, so unlike the first movie we don't get to see much of it. Rexy loses, and just like the first film it looks like she might be dead, only this time the Therizinosaurus from earlier arrives to save the day. And just as the Giga turns most of its attention to it, Rexy stands up and, well, she gives the Giga a bit of a shove, it falls over, and impales itself on the Therizinosaurus claws, killing it in what I have to say is one of the most coincidental moments of this film. That's it for the Giga. It's dead and has done barely anything in this movie. The main cast now escape, and that's basically it for the film. Oh no, wait. Dr. Wu, who the film just basically forgets until the end. He re-encounters everyone and begs for escape because he alone can solve the locust problem with his single mutated locust now that he's had time to study Clone Child and Baby Blue. And this was a great moment to finally have a good character moment between the original cast. But again, the movie ignores that moment, with all that's being said is "I remember you" from Alan Grant, and Ian Malcolm doesn't want to give him a chance. But the cast let him escape with them anyway. A great moment for the original cast and Wu to talk, and the movie yet again fails to take advantage. The film ends with another one of those news reports. Biosyn gets shut down, the dinosaurs stay in the valley to live their lives, Wu saves the planet with his single locust, an awful plan by the way. What happens if the locust dies before it does its thing? And he gets made out to be the bloody hero. And that's about it. The message by the film's end is that the dinosaurs are here to stay and we have to live with it, which is exactly where the film started. Nothing has changed or progressed. So what do we have in terms of plot? A dinosaur movie where the two main plots are about saving a kidnapped clone child or solving a bug problem. This is a dinosaur movie where the dinosaurs actually feel pretty superfluous to the film. The plot threads as they are don't feel very substantial, and by the end of the movie the situation hasn't changed. The dinosaurs are still all over, and the whole question the film seemed to be aiming towards at the end of Fallen Kingdom, that is, how the world deals with free roaming dinosaurs, is basically ignored. This is a movie where most of the runtime is devoted to locusts. Why would I go to a dinosaur movie to care about some mutant insects or a clone child? We were sold on the idea of a world where dinosaurs were retaking the planet, but that's not what we got. Now with the plot looked at, let's move on to the next important part of a dinosaur film. So Dominion has on screen the most dinosaur species of any of the films so far. In terms of individual prehistoric species, it's a smorgasbord of creatures big and small. And not only do we have the pterosaurs and the mosasaurs and the dinosaurs, but we also have Dimetrodon and Lystrosaurus, marking this as the first movie where we have pre-Mesozoic era animals on screen. The dinosaurs are, for the most part, well designed. The quality of the CGI is more or less okay. The physical animatronics, however, are just not up to par. The worst examples of this are the Microceratus and the Lystrosaurus that look ultra rubbery and like cheap toys. The scene with the Giga also makes the animatronic look poor, where they rapidly switch in some pretty harsh cuts between CGI and animatronic. In my view, these animatronics look worse than the ones in the first films, and I'm not sure why they stand out so much. There are some amazing standout animals however. The Pyroraptor looks amazing, and while I find the whole swimming thing a little weird, it's still a beautiful creature. I also really like the design of the Quetzalcoatlus, the Giga, and the Therizino. However, while there are some beautiful designs, the way the movie handles these animals is less effective. The dinosaurs and other prehistoric animals in this film are already not vital to the plot, thanks to insects and clone children, but the dinosaurs we do have in the movie are pretty inconsequential. They serve only as methods to chase the cast from one area to another. Each animal encounter pretty much goes the same. Cast and animal meet, animal chases cast in fake danger scene, cast escape, and the animal in the chase disappears from the rest of the film. Of all of the animals in this movie, only Rex, Giga and Theri really get more than one proper scene. The rest of the animals get one scene and maybe a mention at the very end of the movie. What's worse is that the most of the dinosaur scenes were spoiled in the trailers. The Quetz scene is the only main scene it shows up in. The Mosasaur scene at the start, same thing. The Carno and Allo in Malta, only scene, same as the Atrociraptors. Pyro is only in the movie for about 2 minutes on the dam. You get the idea. The film throws prehistoric animals at you left, right and centre, only to barely use any of them in the plot. I feel like the movie went for quantity over quality, and I would have vastly preferred to see fewer species but have them more on screen. Like Best in Slot, I also think a few species could have been completely removed. The The remade Rex Giga fight at the end also starts verging on kaiju territory, as does the almost perfect strike of the quets on the aircraft. And the fight at the end, because it's so badly shot and so dark, adds nothing to the ending. It doesn't feel like the film deserves and earns this fight, unlike in Jurassic World. In short, the dinosaurs are badly used, merely there because it's a Jurassic World movie, which spend most of their time chasing people around from one plot area to another, and thanks to the locusts, they aren't even the main element of the story. Let's go through the characters of this story, and this is probably going to take a while. Let's start with the Jurassic World cast first. Claire Dearing is for the most part pretty similar to how she is in Fallen Kingdom. She shows genuine care for the animals that she tries to rescue at the start of the movie, although her main purpose in the film seems to be to become Clone Child's mother. While she is definitely better written than she was in Jurassic World, I feel like she has even less of a purpose in this movie than before. She does, however, get to be part of the more better scenes, such as the Dilophosaurus scene and the Therizinosaurus scene. By the end of the movie, she has become Clone Child's mum, so yay, I guess? I feel the film failed to make use of one of the concepts it mentions at the start, where the vet and Franklin question Claire Dearing's actions and whether she feels guilty about Jurassic World. It's a character point that deserved exploring, the movie gave it no time. Owen Grady is, well, just Chris Pratt playing Chris Pratt. He is an action man. He rides horses, he rides motorbikes, rustles up dinosaurs, gets involved in punch-ups. He repeats his bike riding with Raptor scene from the first movie. Again, he does this silly hand thing with dinosaurs multiple times. The main purpose he has in the film is to get baby Blue back, something he promises Blue directly. And because she's a pet, she understands him. Obviously he succeeds, and at the end of the film baby Blue and Blue get united. But again, that's his sole purpose really in this movie. The idea he would make a promise to a dinosaur is thankfully so stupid it gets called out by Ian Malcolm. It does feel odd that Alan Grant doesn't criticise Owen Grady either, but more on that later. Since we're mentioning pets, let's look briefly at Blue and baby Blue. Thankfully, Blue has very little presence in this movie, and is primarily here to provide a baby as a means to get Owen Grady involved. I feel like the movie missed a chance here to give Blue an actual raptor mate. We know that the Jurassic Park 3 sauna raptors are wild, so why you not make one of those Dino Daddy? The whole asexual reproduction driven by monitor DNA is such a lackluster explanation. Clone Child, ugh. So I didn't really like the introduction of her in the second movie, and in this film she serves even less of a point. She spends the first part of the movie being a miserable brat, and I wish movies would move away from depicting teenage characters as angsty brats. After capture by the evildoers of Biosyn, we learn she is somehow vital to stopping the locust threat because of the way she was cloned. Slightly retconning details we were told in Fallen Kingdom, it turns out she was created by a geneticist who was part of the original team on Isla Sorna. While this is probably the best they could do with the character, integrating her existence into the wider canon, I feel like it's a solution to a problem that didn't need to exist. I think given the events of Fallen Kingdom, finding a way of integrating Maisie into the story effectively would be difficult. I would have tried to focus more on her actions in Fallen Kingdom, perhaps have her question these actions, giving all the chaos and death it's caused, and have her struggle to ethically or moralistically come to terms with it, perhaps through a friendship with Ian or Alan Grant. Dodgson. This is a tough one. Dodgson currently works as a parody of Steve Jobs, a corporate leader, and I find it very cringy. The whole Apple parody just feels too tongue-in-cheek. He's also not really very evil. To quote Austin Powers, he's the Diet Coke of evil. At one point, he just throws a temper tantrum in front of his staff, being almost as much of a brat as Clone Child. His motive is also very limited. Using genetically engineered locusts to attack food supplies that aren't Biosyn made is okay, but locusts are omnivorous, so this plan was never going to work fully. In addition, one wonders why Biosyn is even bothering. The company is clearly doing very well. They have sole access to the dinosaurs, they're obviously wealthy given that huge Biosyn facility. It doesn't make much sense for the company to take such a risky course of action as this. The locust plan literally risks bringing down every major global superpower onto their heads. His constant eating throughout the story is also awfully distracting, and I didn't get why. At first, I wondered if this was some sort of medicine and that he had some disease that Wu was working to cure, but no, it's just him snacking. I also feel like we are missing him admitting to the original cast his part of Jurassic World's downfall with Nedry. One thing I would say is that his death scene is more or less perfect, and is something I would probably leave totally intact, but again, it does feel a little undeserved by the film and functions more as nostalgia. Over to Henry Wu, and this legitimately had me confused. For 2 movies, the Jurassic World team focused on turning Wu into a megalomaniac bad guy. He had allowed his arrogance and lack of hubris to turn into a god complex, creating the Indominus Rex and later Indoraptor. He had the air of a sophisticated bad guy, behind the Cheshire Cat grin and the turtleneck jumpers. While I didn't like what they turned him into, it was at least better than what he is in this movie. In this film, he is a washed up, spineless individual who acts scared by discount Steve Jobs. He gushes over Clone Child's mother, who apparently was able to do something that not even Wu can recreate. That's right, the person who brought the dinosaurs back from extinction, who was able to mix together multiple species to create the Indo creatures, can't figure out that one thing. It feels so artificial and not in line with the character that we know from the other movies. This film also fails to explain why Dr. Wu is so helpless. At the end of Fallen Kingdom, we see all his research and such be rescued, and yet the Wu we see in Biosyn is a big change. The worst part of Wu in this plot is that he has, for the last 2 films, been a bad guy. In this movie, he's permitted a good ending, to use a gaming metaphor. At the very end of the movie, almost as a side mention, he gets to release his single modified locust and apparently save the world from food chain chaos. No punishment, no death, nothing. And the locusts were his fault to start with. He doesn't deserve the ending he's given, and the plot itself barely makes use of him. One wonders why they even bothered to turn him into a bad guy. The film again avoids interacting with the previous movies. KAYLA, meanwhile, is one of the few triumphs of this film. She functions a bit like a mirror for Owen Grady, a badass action chick who is not scared of getting involved in a punch-up. It is also heavily inferred that she is at least bisexual, if not a lesbian. I like the way that this character treats her. Unlike Owen, whose action character traits have to be all over the show and are basically his only traits, KAYLA feels like a character who is not just playing a stereotype. Her sexuality is also handled with subtlety and with tact. It's not a defining part of her character, unlike so many other more recent movies, and it's not forced into the centre. She also demonstrates an emotional connection to her aircraft, and at the end of the movie uses her money to get a replacement for the one that gets shot down by Top Gun Quetzal. The only difference I'd make here is that at one point she finds this cool looking Biosyn chopper and has this oh yeah kind of look on her face. I'd rather her end scene show her with that chopper still all painted up and stuff, rather than her getting the exact same aircraft again. I would have also liked more time on her character and motivations, as well as her opinion on the dinosaurs, something that this movie doesn't do very much with any character. But like I say, she is one of the triumphs of the film. As a final mention to the Jurassic World cast, the lady in white, who is in charge of the Atrociraptors. I feel like the movie could have done more with her. Where did she get these raptors? How did she train them? Did she know about the Indoraptor training? I feel like this mysterious lady in white had a lot more potential that the film completely ignored. Not to mention she punches Claire Dearing in the face, which makes her a good character in my opinion. Now to the old cast. Let's start with Ellie Sattler. I have to say she looks fantastic. It was nice to see her maintain the magic with the dinosaurs when she remarks that you never quite get used to seeing them. I just feel that her dedication to this locust plot feels a little weird. In a world where dinosaurs are commonplace, and given their connection through Jurassic Park, it seems strange that the 3 returning characters would not have stayed in closer contact. Ellie finds a natural friendship with Claire Dearing, and the 2 of them facing off the bugs in the server room is probably the best part between them both. Alan Grant, meanwhile, is definitely playing the dad role in this film. When we first see him, he's doing what he does best, digging up a dinosaur. His conversation with Ellie in the tent has all the hallmarks of sexual tension we come to expect, especially his response to hearing about the divorce. I have to say, considering his age, he also looks pretty good. Throughout the film, he has a similar role to how he was in the first movie, leading the cast through the Dimetrodon caves, helping Ellie infiltrate the locust labs. His comment at the end of the movie where he looks on a free dinosaur and remarks, "I could get used to it," is a nice touch. He also has a wonderful line with Ramsey Cole, who asks him if he knew how strong the electric fences were at Jurassic Park, and Grant replies with a blunt "yes," referring to poor Tim and when he had to give him CPR. The fact he and Ellie finally kiss at the end of the movie, cementing a relationship us fans wanted from day one, is probably the biggest payoff for them both. The only thing I would say is that the film misses a chance to talk about how things are different for a paleontologist now, considering dinosaurs are literally everywhere. Ian Malcolm, however, is in my eyes not a success. And I know this is probably a very controversial opinion. I feel like in this movie he is playing a parody of himself rather than Ian Malcolm. While the lecture when we first see him is classic Ian Malcolm, much of him in the rest of the movie is not as good. He talks in questions and half riddles, and much of the suave and sophisticated Ian is just not there. He's just weird, and not in the same nice weird as the first film. The first movie presents him as fiercely intelligent, and the second movie presents him as someone who can actually have a meaningful emotional connection to someone. But there's none of this in this movie. I also find it very strange that Lewis Dodgson would even hire Ian Malcolm after everything that's already happened and think this was a good idea. Dodgson seems genuinely surprised at Ian's betrayal. Ian's moment distracting the Giga with the flaming locust, much like using a flare on Rexy, was a good scene, but again for nostalgia's sake. But I also feel like the movie missed an opportunity here to give us an emotional punch and have Ian die right there and then. The movie is badly needing some emotional payoff, and killing off part of the main cast, someone as potent and popular as Ian, would have been better than nothing. All in all, I feel like the film squandered the idea of bringing the old and new casts together. For most of the movie, they don't interact, and while this means both sets of cast get their moments, I feel like more interaction and more character moments between all of them would have made the movie better. A little less action and a little more character, please. So this is tricky for me. What I will say before I discuss the effects is that the cinema I saw this at had some pretty serious quality problems when it came to its projector. So I am prepared to consider that some of the issues I want to mention here were not due to the film. That being said, I'm not the only person on YouTube who's mentioned it. Some of the CGI in this film really sucked. It was most noticeable for me in Malta, where the raptors chased Grady on his bike. The raptors looked very fuzzy, and the poor shadows made all of the dinosaurs feel very out of place. Throughout the film, there were some odd moments where the CGI brought me out of it, but there were some also good CGI action scenes. The Mosasaurus attack at the start of the movie and the locust swarm effects were really good, especially when they were on fire in this swirly, fiery mass. The Quetzal attack was also pretty good in its CGI quality. Seeing the forest on fire towards the end of the movie was probably the best effect, and the rest of this section as the dinosaurs escaped the blaze. The Biosyn compound also looked pretty great, nestled in its mountains. In regards to sound effects, again it's a mixed bag, and I think part of it might have been the cinema, but I'm not sure. There were many times where character dialogue was too quiet compared to the ambient noises around them, or because of excessive sound effects. However, on the more positive side of things, the use of sound in the Therizino CLARE scene helps make this section one of the few that had any sort of tension to it whatsoever. The clicking of the blind Theri and the way Claire does her best to avoid making any sort of noise made this scene one of the best. It was just a shame most of this particular scene had been shown already in the trailers. One area where the film does fail for me is in the music. Usually, with any of these films, the music is one of the best things I remember, and there were many great themes. In fact, one of my favourite musical scores from the original Jurassic World movies is the InGen March that plays whenever they're on screen. Of course, There are the classic themes as well from the original 3 films, which are still for me some of the best movie scores of all time. However, while this movie uses the occasional bit of music from the classics, it's lacking a distinct theme for itself. Much of the music is kind of generic. It's missing the epic nature of the Jurassic Park movies or even the Jurassic World movies. In fact, there is barely any music I actually remember from this film, as they all just seem to fade into this mass of mind-numbing action. The last thing to discuss in detail is how this movie functions as a conclusion to the trilogy. The tagline for this movie was that it was an epic conclusion, but was it really? The previous 2 movies spent a lot of time building up the ideas of a questionably evil Dr. Wu and hinted at the imminent chaos of dinosaurs let loose in the wild. At the end of Fallen Kingdom, Ian Malcolm's speech indicated so much doom and gloom would be coming. However, after all of the setups and possible potential, Dominion seems to waste it or not want to engage with it. The interesting premise of a world where dinosaurs were pushing back humanity, where they were retaking the planet, was mostly ignored, replaced with a story about oversized locusts and bias in being an evil corporation. As a conclusion to the trilogy of the 3 Jurassic World movies, it wasted all of the potential. It also wasted the point of bringing the original cast back, and added an extraneous extra chapter to their stories that were for the most part completed. It was a movie full of nostalgia baiting, and a movie that ran away from its Jurassic World roots. So before I give my final conclusion in this review, I want to try to give this film a rating and a position in my ratings of all of the movies. For this film, I'm going to rate it out of 10 in the following categories: plot, characters, dinosaurs, effects, sound and music, pacing and payoff. And this is what I would give the film in these categories. Overall, this movie ends up with an average rating of 3.4 out of 10. In terms of where I would rate this movie in terms of the others, I would argue that this movie is worse as a Jurassic movie than even Fallen Kingdom. It might work better as a movie, however the poor pacing, poor payoff and poor premise do nothing to make this film better than even the worst of the other 5 movies. Fallen Kingdom at least felt like it had a good structure with clear character motivation. Dominion is a bland popcorn flick full of nostalgia that only serves to demonstrate that the franchise is fast running out of ideas and perhaps needs to be put into a museum for a while. Now at some point I am going to do a what if video explaining what changes I would make to the movie to improve it, since it's very easy to just criticize, but less easy to try to actually improve something. Let me know in the comments what things you would change about Dominion to improve the movie, and let me know if you disagree with any of the points I've made. Don't forget, if you're new here, to subscribe for more content from all of us at Tricolor Gaming, and I'll see you all in the next video. Until then, stay safe and goodbye.